Guys, we need to talk about Little Nightmares 3. Any fans of the Little Nightmares series have probably already seen the mixed reception that this game was met with at launch. Having now ventured through the desolate world of the nowhere, I can see why. The thing is, Little Nightmares 3 isn't necessarily a bad game. It's got the same appearance and mostly the same mechanics as the other two, but it just feels like it never quite meets that mark. There isn't the tension and frankly the panic that comes with making your way through one of the previous Little Nightmares games, which from my experience makes up a huge part of the fear factor. In the last two Little Nightmares games, you're barely given enough time to really process what you're running from. If you take too long trying to work out if you're being chased by anything vaguely human, you'll most likely be grabbed or killed and have to restart that section. There are areas where you have to sneak around the enemy, and even though they follow specific movement patterns which you can easily learn if you have to keep redoing parts, they still feel unpredictable. Honestly, the amount of times I've physically held my breath and grit my teeth while sneaking around enemies in Little Nightmares 1 and 2, or running for my life, are some of the most memorable moments I had with these games. Don't get me wrong, Little Nightmares 3 still has these sneaking sections and of course absolutely loves a chase, but it feels so formulaic that even in the first run you know exactly what to do and where to go. Sometimes before you sneak around you have a decent chunk of time to just study whatever creature you're looking at, be it the librarian wheeling around her office or the hand puppet thing that chases you into a cardboard box. This does diminish the fear factor a little bit. I used to love having to question whatever I was running from as it happened, and though the villains in the past were sort of human-shaped, it was hard to make out exactly what they were. Faces were warped and clothes didn't fit quite right, and each character had a strange ability that they would use exclusively to nab you from whatever hiding place you thought you'd found. For example, the janitor in the first game genuinely haunted my dreams when I first played. I won't tell you how old I was when I first played this game, as frankly having nightmares about a video game character isn't something that should have happened at that age, but just know I did. Its horrible stretched out arms kept me up at night too, and I literally had convinced myself that it was real and coming to get me. I hadn't had fear like that since the Weeping Angels episode of Doctor Who. But again, villains in Little Nightmares 3 do have these abilities. You've got the baby with laser eyes, not to be confused with the laser baby from The Boys, though quite similar. The supervisor lady who's part human skin suit and part mechanical spider. And the horrible man with a sentient hand puppet that looks a bit like Nigel Thornberry sans his moustache. The final boss is also there, but for spoiler's sake, you're welcome, I will not talk about that. And even though the character design is still quite horrifying, it doesn't feel anywhere near as tense. If you're spotted, there's simply no way to escape. You also aren't given much time at all to really get to know the characters, both evil and playable. And before you know it, you're at the boss fight and the game wraps up. That's where my main issue with Little Nightmares 3 lies, its runtime. It took me about 4 hours to roll credits, and that included multiple instances of sitting on the pause menu to go and make a cup of tea, get a snack, or generally do something else, which is probably a sign in itself that I wasn't as engaged with this game as I have been in the past. So if I'm being generous, it will take you 4 hours to complete. The other two Little Nightmares games were by no means long, with the first taking me around 4 hours and the second around 5, but they didn't cost nearly as much. They also felt like whole stories, whereas the third feels incomplete. There's only one story regarding the main character, Lo, which I grasped hold of, but it's not particularly explored and it's so down to interpretation I'm not convinced that I got it right anyway. In a way, it feels like bits and pieces from previous games have been cobbled together to make the third. The monsters don't quite flow together, and you're tasked with travelling around a bunch of different areas through mirrors which don't quite match up. Nor is it ever explained why Lo has the ability to do this. There are so many loose ends that I wish had been tied up, especially for its price point of £35, might I add. I don't know if they're setting up for a DLC or something, but it massively lets the experience down as it currently stands. It's the first game made by a different developer, Supermassive Games, which probably explains why it looks a lot like a Little Nightmares game, but doesn't quite nail the identity it had carved out for itself already. In an attempt to make it so much like the first two games, it feels almost uncanny. It struggles to find itself, really. The bones are there, but it's just too confused and tangled up in itself due to how much it's trying to pull from. Conveniently, after finishing Little Nightmares 3, the demo of Tarsier Studios' newest endeavour, Reanimal, was available to play, so obviously I had to give it a go. And it obviously feels a lot more like the first 2 Little Nightmares games, more so than the third. Saying that though, it's also a completely new setting and story which it manages to tell in the first few lines of dialogue at the start of the demo. The world and the few enemies that you do experience are, I would say, slightly scarier and a lot more threatening than all Little Nightmares games, not exclusively the third one. You are literally chased by a deflated skin suit at one point, and it is absolutely horrifying. Not to mention the elongated man thing that hunts you down around stacks of suitcases. The demo of Reanimal replicates the bleak, dark theming of the first 2 games, which is definitely missed in the third. You also have more involved puzzle solving rather than dragging around a single crate to reach a jump that you couldn't make otherwise, and areas make use of the entire depth of a section rather than just the foreground. You know, all that good stuff that you probably loved about the first 2 games. This only reinforces the feeling that I have of Supermassive not quite knowing what to do with Little Nightmares 3. Tarsier Studios obviously know how to build the world and write the story, but when that challenge is handed to someone else, and they desperately want to build something that isn't their usual story, it just falls a bit flat. So I go back to my original point. Little Nightmares 3 isn't a bad game, but it certainly struggles to really find its legs, especially when put next to the other 2. An attempt has been made to continue the legacy, but in handing over to a new developer, it's struggled to nail the things that it's known for. I'd be curious to see where the series now goes, if anywhere, after its mixed reception. Otherwise, I can't imagine many people, much like me, will be particularly keen to jump back in. If you've also explored the confusing world of Little Nightmares 3, let me know what you thought in the comments below. And subscribe to PC Gamer if you want to see more videos like this. Bye!